What's up and welcome to My Point of View. I am your fat and opinionated host, and at this point, all of the updates and all of the information that continues to roll in about Bryan Kohberger, it's become overwhelming. It is completely overwhelming at this point. I am having to upload multiple videos on multiple YouTube channels. I got updates coming over on the Swagit app. I'll actually post a link to the Swagit app in the comment section. Be sure to download it and follow me over there. There's so much information that I don't even have enough time in the day to cover it. Now we know that Bryan Kohberger was caught in Pennsylvania. Obviously, the situation that went down with Bryan Kohberger, let's just call it that. I have to worry about YouTube censorship. Obviously, that didn't happen in Pennsylvania. So we know that Bryan traveled from Washington all the way to Pennsylvania, where he was watched and he was actually tracked along the way. And I believe the authorities were watching him for 4 days before ultimately making the arrest. What we didn't know until now is that Bryan did not make this trip alone. Bryan's father joined him on this trip, meaning that Bryan and his dad traveled from Washington all the way to Pennsylvania. Imagine that car ride. Was it an awkward car ride? Now, the story is that Bryan was going home for the holidays. We know that Bryan was going to school and what have you after what happened with the Idaho 4. I'm not so sure if this was a trip for the holidays. I mean, obviously, it happened during the holidays. But I can't help but feel like maybe that's just a cover or more of an excuse because Bryan was starting to feel the heat and probably wanted to get the hell out of town. But he probably didn't want to be too suspicious by just up and leaving right away. Now, that's just my personal opinion. Who knows what actually went down? But we do know for a fact now that Bryan traveled with his father on that long trip all the way to Pennsylvania. And you got to believe if they're traveling from Washington, maybe there was some conversation about this case. I mean, Bryan, after all, owns the vehicle that the authorities were looking for, and that was no secret. Now, of course, you couldn't look at someone and just say, oh, you got the same vehicle, you're obviously the person. But it's got to be kind of weird, right? But I want to dive into this article so I can give you all a better understanding of what transpired because people actually saw and interacted with Bryan and his father along the way. The man arrested in connection with the November unalivings of 4 University of Idaho students attended a nearby university in Washington state and traveled across the country in December to spend the holidays with his parents. Bryan Christopher Kohberger was arrested in Monroe County, Pennsylvania on Friday on a arrest warrant for first-degree unaliving charges issued by the Moscow, Idaho Police Department. Kohberger was apprehended at his parents' house in Pennsylvania, where Kohberger went several days before Christmas. Monroe County Chief Public Defender Jason Labar told this information to various media outlets. A white Elantra authorities had been looking for in connection with the slayings was also at the parents' house, the attorney added. He was home for the holidays, says Bryan's attorney. Kohberger's father traveled with him from Washington state to Pennsylvania, according to the public defender and a person who claims to have interacted with the father and son earlier in December. That person wishes to remain anonymous, and I understand why. They said that they did not know the father and son, but engaged in friendly conversation with them at an auto maintenance shop on December 16th in Pennsylvania while the two were getting their Elantra serviced. A separate person also confirmed this information and confirmed that they were at this business location on December 16th. The father told the individual that he flew to Washington State and made the cross-country trip with Kohberger, adding his son would be traveling to the West Coast alone after the holidays. Authorities have not indicated the suspect's father is in any way implicated in this situation. Media outlets have contacted the father, but he did not comment. The person described the younger Kohberger as a little awkward, but not suspiciously so. The suspect reportedly told the person he wanted to go into the field of behavioral criminal justice and wanted to become a professor. Now, I don't want anyone acting irresponsibly and going crazy with this information. I'm going to share some opinions here, and we're going to go over some thoughts. I'm going to think out loud, but please be responsible here and understand that the facts have been provided, and now it's time for some opinion. I do find it odd that Kohberger's father traveled all the way from Pennsylvania to Washington to travel with Kohberger. And then he even stated that, afterwards, he'll be driving back by himself. What was the point of that? I'm not saying that these people knew anything. I'm just saying it must have been hella awkward picking up your son from a college, or taking one step further, meeting your son at his apartment that is 10 miles away from where this crime occurred and riding with him in the Elantra all the way across country. That's just really weird to me. Now, to be clear, I'm not saying that I think anything is up. I'm just saying that's weird. You make this trip across country just to drive with someone back to the same place. In my mind, I'm like, well, why wouldn't Bryan just book a plane ticket? If you're going to book a plane ticket to come to be out here with Bryan, then why not just, I don't know, fly? Why didn't Bryan just fly to his parents' house? It's just people are going to do what they want to do. I'm not saying this means anything. I'm just saying if I was a detective, I would be looking at that situation with a raised eyebrow, wanting to know why this went down this way. You flew all the way across country to drive back across country, knowing that supposedly afterwards your son was going to drive back across country by himself. It seems like it would be a little easier just to book your son a flight home and back. But people are going to travel how they want to travel. So I can assume that authorities are probably looking at that like, this is weird because it's obviously weird. And to be clear, because I have to do this because, we're all adults here, but for some reason people act crazy. I'm not saying that means anything. But at the very least, that had to be an awkward drive. Because if Bryan's dad didn't know anything cool, but Bryan knew, and he's intimately in a small closed environment with his dad, traveling all the way across the country, Hopefully, the radio wasn't on. I can tell you one thing. I was listening to the radio earlier today on the way to Publix. You know what I heard on the radio? News about this same situation. Imagine driving in an Elantra across country with your father after he met you 10 miles away from this crime and listening to people talk about the crime on the news. Hopefully his dad doesn't have social media and he isn't on any Twitters or Facebooks or Insta apps or whatever the hell the kids call it these days, because he damn sure would have seen something about that. So I'm just saying that had to be an awkward trip. And that's definitely a piece of information that I was not expecting. And I do think it's a piece of information that people will probably run wild with. And I'm not saying that's right, but I'm just saying it. I don't know now. I don't know now. I don't know, okay? It's weird. It's weird. But seeing that people saw them along the way and interacted with them, they said that he was a little awkward, but not suspiciously so. And you can't just expect that anyone that sees Bryan is just going to automatically look at him and think that he's capable of doing what he did, because I like to think that people usually still see the good in people. Now, I talk about how I could look at Bryan's eyes and know that he's a fucking psychopath, and I stand by that comment, but I also see the good in people as well, and I don't think that you can look at someone, even if they look crazy, and just assume that they did something. You know what I mean? But I wonder how these people feel now, knowing that they worked on the vehicle that everyone was looking for. So that, I just hope that I never have to cross paths with anything like this, because it's got to be an icky feeling. Like, everyone who knew Bryan or went to school with Bryan or what have you, their lives are going to be affected forever, just knowing that in some way, shape, or form, they're connected with this weirdo. So I hate that people have to be put in that position. You know what I mean? But all in all, who knows? Who knows? I definitely do think it's weird that he took this trip with his father and the way all of that went down. But who knows what's going on with that. But one thing I will say, and I do feel comfortable saying, is that little, he was going home for the holidays. Not buying it at all. I am not buying it at all. And I don't think that in Bryan's mind that he was probably going to be going back to school. Let me take that back. I don't think in Bryan's mind that if he knew he was going to be returning or not. I think there's a possibility that Bryan was going to try to cool it out for a little bit over the holidays and feel out the situation. I do think that Bryan was keeping up with this situation. And it's already been revealed that he had to keep up with this situation because it was talked about in his classrooms. His professor talked about this very case in the classroom with him in it. So that is really weird. So he had to keep up with the case. I kind of feel like Bryan knew, and this is my opinion, that if he left right away in that white Elantra, that people would have suspected something. Or he thinks that would have made it easier for him to get caught. I think Bryan hung around. He did what he needed to do at school. And I think he sensed and saw that authorities were getting closer. Anyone that's been looking at this case, and I haven't been covering the entire case, but I've been watching it and I've been following the updates. Over the past week and some change, I would say about a week or so, things began to change a little bit. At least in my mind, the way I was looking at things, it looked like authorities were getting a little bit closer. It no longer felt like something that was going to go unsolved, in my opinion. And the wording that certain people were using, it felt like they were getting a tad bit closer to something. And if we felt that way, not just me, but I'm sure some of you all felt that way. If people felt that way, then I imagine Bryan probably felt that way as well. And just imagine you driving to school every day in a vehicle that matches the description of the vehicle that they're looking for. Just 10, 15 minutes away are 10 miles away from where this incident went down. So this is a crazy update, but I can guarantee you all we're going to get a lot more crazy updates because there seems to be no end to the madness. I never expected to get this much information about this guy, this quickly, but it's all rolling in and everyone has something to say. And we live in the age of social media. So every single person who's ever talked to this guy eventually is going to make a TikTok about this. And we'll talk about that right here on this channel. So be sure to subscribe and ring the notification bell. Drop your thoughts down in the comments, hit the thumbs up. And yeah, follow me on Swagit. And always remember, remain opinionated.